fantastic job. And once again, we are here broadcasting live, this time from the House of Culture,
And the
government house, for the official visit to Belize of His Excellency Dr. Miguel Diaz-Canel Bermudez. And he's the first secretary of the Cuban Communist Party, as well as the president of the Republic of Cuba.
What a wonderful and historic event this is.
This is
Oh,
April. This
yes.
is the first time
Yes.
that a Cuban president
Has set
foot
onto
on
Belize soil.
That is impressive in and of itself. But you know what is also impressive, April? Some background information. One, the fact that the staff over there at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they are the ones behind the organization of this entire event. And in fact, they did all of this within the span of 2 weeks. They did this entire planning session. And so what we have now, there is the arrival of the dignitaries.
Yes. We have the arrival of His Excellency Miguel Diaz-Canel
Bermudez.
Bermudez along with his lovely wife.
Right, and so we have a list of delegation that is in with President Dr. Miguel Diaz-Canel Bermudez. We also have his lovely wife, His Excellency Dr. Liz Cuesta Peraza. This is the wife of the president.
Yes. We also have joining him the members of the Political Bureau and the Minister of Foreign Affairs, His Excellency Bruno Rodriguez Parilla, and the Minister of Foreign Trade and Foreign Investment, His Excellency Rodrigo Malmierca Diaz.
We also have the Minister of Public Health, and we know that's a huge deal in terms of partnership with Belize, the public health sector, His Excellency Jose Angel Portal Miranda, as well as the Vice Minister of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, His Excellency Josefina Vidal Fierro.
And we also have the General Director of Latin America and the Caribbean Division in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Paul, and you know that this is a huge deal for us. His Excellency Eugenio Martinez Enrique, as well as Her Excellency Maria Caridad Balaguer Labrada, who is the Cuban ambassador to Belize, and of course no stranger to us here in Belize. She has been, Paul, the representative of Cuba in Belize for quite some time now.
And so there we're going to appreciate the moment where Prime Minister John Briceño is clearly greeting this huge delegation. And what is going to happen, April, is that as the president arrives, which he has arrived at the government house, Prime Minister John Briceño, as he's doing right now, will receive them.
Yes.
And he will escort them to the second floor of the building. And there will be a brief meet and greet with the president, his spouse,
the delegation.
We've seen Her Excellency, the Governor General of Belize, Farla Salam, receive them at the PGIA.
Yes.
Well, she's here as well, and she'll be joining the Prime Minister along with the president and his spouse for that brief meet and greet. So you would imagine that will be a very important discussion. That'll be a very historic discussion.
Yes.
I would love to be to have a fly on the wall per se, to kind of get a sense of what's happening inside that room at this time, and that's what we're seeing right now. We're broadcasting live from within that meeting room, and it's just for people to get an appreciation, a sense of how historic this moment really is.
Paul, I think it's one for the books. Our viewers need to understand how important this meeting is. Belize has had bilateral relations with Cuba for the past almost 28 years this coming year here. And Belize has had this exchange with Cuba in terms of medical trade, in terms of education and so forth. And it is just a wonderful moment to see them finally sitting in a room together here in Belize. Whatever agreements will be settled, whatever policies that we can come together to make our relationship stronger, not just with Cuba, Paul, but with all of our Central American Caribbean brethren.
And so there we see His Excellency Dr. Miguel Diaz-Canel Bermudez having an engagement with Her Excellency Farla Salam.
Yes.
So
As we
They are having that engagement right now. We see some pleasantries being shared, some smiles.
as we as we wonder, Paul, as we see this event happening and we're seeing our GG, it's really important to note. I can't imagine how wonderful this conversation is going. As our GG Froilat Salam is a historical figure, as well as being one of our first indigenous persons to be appointed as the Governor General of Belize, sitting and having this conversation with the first president of Cuba that is not of the Castro family.
Indeed.
Wonderful historic events taking place here today at the Governor General.
That's a
At the government house.
That's a huge point to note there, April. Also to note that where they're meeting right now, the government house,
Yes, the government
that
house.
this is in fact just to compound in the historic moment, that this is the where many dignitaries were received by governors in the past. Right? And so that this house of culture, also referred to as the government house, but now it is Belize. We're an independent nation, yet we continue to carry on that history, that legacy of receiving dignitaries, receiving foreign leaders right here at the government
I love
house.
that you made mention of this, Paul, because as we have these wonderful relations with Cuba, we have to remind our viewers that when we were striving for our independence, Cuba was one of the few countries that had backed our road to independence. So it's only right and fair that we provide them this amount of generosity, and we continue to strengthen our bilateral relations with this country.
Indeed, and just to say that the welcome here at the House of Culture is immaculate, to say the
I
least.
wish our viewers could feel how
Yeah.
wonderful the sea breeze is right now here at the government house, as we have the steel band playing, the marimba is setting up. We are just here waiting for the rest of the ceremony to commence.
And I would imagine they'll get a chance as the ceremony continues. So that's one of the things that we know about Belize's relationship with Cuba, in that they were one of the first to celebrate, to support Belize getting its independence. And so we saw where the father of the nation, he built a strong relationship with the
Cuba.
then president of Cuba, and that led to that support, which then afterwards led to Belize receiving its independence. So it's a huge deal here, and we know that even here in Belize, we have a huge Cuban population, where Cuban nationals have migrated to Belize, and they've been contributing significantly
to our country's
to our
health,
country,
education,
health, economy. I think in all sectors, you even have entrepreneurs, business people, and so this has been a long-standing relationship that continues to grow. One of the things we know as well is that Cuba has supported Belize hugely in education, and so we know where over 100 Belizean nationals, Belizean students, has traveled to Cuba. Cuba has received them to receive their education and training, particularly in
the
health.
Medical field,
but we also know that they have engineers. You know, I know someone personally, April, and I'm sure you perhaps know someone personally, and you could ask a lot of Belizeans, and they would tell you, I know someone that traveled to Cuba and did their studies there. So I would imagine these discussions will entail a lot about education, about health,
policy, economic growth. But Paul, it's also important to note that Belize is one of the frontliners in terms of bringing Caribbean and Latin American countries together. Last week we saw that at the joint annual meeting for the degraded lands, when we had Latin American countries coming in for policy, Caribbean countries coming in for policy making in terms of what we are doing about climate change and how we're able to support each other so that we can battle this fight against climate change. And Belize, again, being one of those, being the country in this particular in these particular meetings that have to be the bridge maker, that has to be the one to connect the Caribbean and Latin America together. Here we see Belize again doing that. We know that we have strong relations with our Central American, Latin American brethren, as well as the Caribbean. Cuba is one of those countries that also lie within two cultures, being a Caribbean country with Latin American roots. And of course, we share that cultural continuity as well.
And that is why it's so important, April, that we have a strong leader here in Belize that not only one wants to continue to have that relationship with Cuba, but two has the vision to continue to build upon that relationship,
yes.
that mutually beneficial relationship at that, because let's look at the facts. When we first entered the COVID-19 pandemic, the Cuban government and those wonderful health experts over there, they were some of the forerunners in creating, developing a COVID-19 vaccine. And they were, in fact, one of the first to lend a helping hand to Belize when we were trying to figure it all out. Where do we go from here? How do we help our people? How do we get across this COVID-19 bridge that had claimed multiple lives? Well, then Cuba stepped in, and they did what they do best with the countries with their bilateral partners, which is to send support and lend a helping hand. And so they did that through the vaccine campaign and sending us those vaccines. So that's another fact to highlight clearly the strong relationships. And
it's not to mention as well, Paul, that whenever our government has to attend bilateral meetings and so forth in other spaces, entering in terms of the G27, G7, all of these UN meetings and so forth, I know for a fact that whenever Belize has to make a speech about bilateral agreements within Central America and Latin America and the Caribbean, we do not forget to include Cuba.
I'm glad you brought it up, April, because it's a regional and an international point of contention that our leaders, we don't shy away from the fact, particularly where Prime Minister John Briceño is concerned. He has taken the opportunity on every international regional platform that he has been given the privilege to speak on, in specific, speak against the U.S. economic sanctions against Cuba, this long-standing economic sanction. He has done a lot to speak out against it and basically to request, to let their support known clearly.
Of course, Paul. And as we are talking about these things, we've seen various education institutions and stakeholders come together to initiate the Lift the Block on Cuba and so forth. For the past few years, there have been many protests and requests on Cuba's behalf from the Belizean population, not just the government itself, but civilian society too. So we have to also include these types of conversations when we're talking about Belize and Cuba. So as we are continuing to prepare for our ceremony, Paul.
And I just want for our viewers that are now joining us to be reminded of the fact that we are broadcasting live. April, from the House of Culture.
Yes, did you hear the music behind us?
I'm sure they're hearing the liveliness of this wonderful music. We're reporting live, and at this point in time, what's taking place is that His Excellency Miguel Diaz-Canel Bermudez, who's the first Secretary of the Cuban Communist Party and President of the Republic of Cuba, is sitting in a meeting with our Prime Minister
and the GG Froila Salam. And Paul, as we are getting ready to start the ceremony soon, we have our Belizean ministers and delegation coming in to support and commemorate this historic event.
It is indeed a historic event, and at this point we are standing under the tent, here along the seaside, where where the official
Ceremony
ceremonies
is
will
about to
take
begin.
place.
Yes.
It's beautifully set.
Yes.
On the hair is very beautifully set. We have the steel pan in the background playing.
At this moment, we see various ministers. We have CEO to the Ministry of Education, Culture, Science and Technology, Dr. Louis Abane. We also have the British High Commissioner is also here. There is many dignitaries here, Paul, today that have come in to support and celebrate this historic event. And I cannot wait to hear the amazing policies and to see the signatures of these policies being implemented as we continue on today's festivities.
So speaking about policies, April, we note the fact that the president of Cuba and the prime minister, that at some point during the day, that, well, I would imagine that it's immediately after these meetings that they will come back down to the first floor where they will be signing agreements. So
Yes.
there's to be signed. And in an interview with the Prime Minister earlier this week, we learned from him that the agreements will include matters regarding related to health, matters related to
Civil
education,
security.
matters related to civil security, and even the more controversial matters related to immigration,
Of course.
and migration. And so these are some of the important discussions.
Right. We are also trying our best to we were able to delegation. Of course, this is a closed door event, but we know that when they are finished, the transparency will continue on here when continue the ceremony. Paul, how are we feeling about all of these dignitaries coming in support of the ceremony today?
Well, you know, it's quite interesting. It shows that Belize's relationship with Cuba, Belize's relationship with Cuba remains strong. It shows that our leaders, they have one position, our government leaders, they have one position on Belize's relationship with Cuba, because we're seeing era representatives from across divisions across the country. We're seeing different dignitaries as well. We're seeing members of the opposition out here as well, by way of Honorable Tracy Panton. She's one of the first opposition members to arrive that I've seen so far, and so we know that leading up to the event there was a bit of controversy, but it's great to see the solidarity here. And then now we see here as well the ambassador for Taiwan to Belize, that he is even here as well. And so this gives me, this encourages me in terms of our relationship.
I mean, you said the Taiwanese ambassador, we have the British High Commissioner here. It kind of just shows testimony, Paul, that Belize is a bridge, not just regionally, but internationally as well. And like we said, we've always stood up for Cuba. And it's just an amazing, and again, I can't stress how historic to discuss that Cuba is going to be sitting among other members of the international arena right here in Belize today for the very
Understand is that they're completing the meeting on the second floor, so that's about to be concluded. And as soon as they complete that meeting on the second floor, the delegation along with the Prime Minister, the Cuban delegation along with the Prime Minister and Her Excellency Farel Islam will be making their way to the first floor, as I mentioned, where they will be signing a number of agreements. And so you'll be able to see all of that, because we're catching all of that for you, so you'll be in and out between our faces and what's actually happening inside. And when all of that is complete, the entire delegation, all in attendance, will be sitting under the tent, what we are under right now, where there will be a number of speeches. And so we'll be hearing from a number of those in attendance. I would imagine the president himself will be giving a speech. I would want to also imagine that Prime Minister John Briceño will be making certain remarks, and that will set the stage for then the wrap up of this ceremony and the luncheon that will take place immediately after.
It's important to note that the luncheon is going to be prepared by none other than our star chef, Sean Whelan. And I see his truck already set up out there from the moment we began, so he is probably there creating a wonderful meal as we speak.
Yeah, and what better way to have welcome the president than to give him a taste of Belizean cuisine, beautiful, dynamic, amazing Belizean cuisine, and it's interesting to note that we share some similarities with Cuba in terms of our food. Because we're Latin America, we have some of the basics.
I know you went to the embassy, you learned a few things. What else did you learn?
Well, you know, they love cassava. I'll tell you one thing. They have a cultural cuisine where they usually have one of these starch as a main staple in their dishes. So what is like a ground food. So they do that a lot. We do it here sometimes in Belize, so that's one of the difference. But when it comes to the rice, the beans, the chicken, and so I would imagine that he will be delighted to try what we have to offer.
It's a wonderful day, Paul, for cultural exchange, policy making to create new ties and friendships with our brethren. We talk about Cuba so much. I think that almost every single generation here understands the revolution, knows to some extent about Fidel Castro and Che Guevara and all of the wonderful strides that Cuba has had to make it on their own. I think that we don't stress enough why Cuba stands to be so important and as an example to the Caribbean and Latin American community, because for the longest time all of us try our best to settle agreements by paper, and Cuba is one of the first countries, if not the only country in the Caribbean that has stood up to higher, stronger countries in the past and has remained independent for so long.
We will emphasize the fact and note that the Cuban president is fresh off a visit from Mexico.
Yes, the Cuba and Mexico do have long-standing friendships, and of course we have to commend the president of Mexico for welcoming him just this past few days.
Yeah, and so some of the things that he highlighted in Mexico is the fact that the island continues to face tremendously difficult challenges. So that's one of the things that he mentioned to the president there in Mexico. The fact that one of the contributors to that is the blows of nature. So we're talking climate change, global warming. These aren't things that only affect Belize, It's one of the things we share here in the Caribbean. The climate change, the U.S. economic sanctions. Yes. But I understand that he was also given a distinct award.
Yes, of course. So as we rightfully mentioned, Mexico and Cuba do have a good, long-standing relationship. And of course, at the visit of the Cuban president at Mexico, Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, he presented the Aguía, La Orden del Aguía Azteca, which is one of the highest distinctive awards that a Mexican official has given to a foreign official. And this award is no small feat, Paul. This award was also given to persons like Fidel Castro and Nelson Mandela in the past. So this just tells us the magnitude of how high regard that Mexico holds Cuba in. And it is also to note that he did this because he commended Cuba for their fast actions when it came to the COVID-19 pandemic and the creation of that vaccine.
And it's also worthy to note that Cuba and the president, His Excellency Dr. Miguel Diaz-Canel Bermudez, has signaled commitments to Mexico to stone balance Mexico for a train project. We've been hearing about this train project, April, and so to bring things into context, to bring things home, that train project that will pretty much wrap around the Yucatan Peninsula, and there are even talks of having it connect to Belize or through Belize. Well, we now know that the Cuban president has committed to export these crushed stones that will be needed for this great train project.
But you know, it kind of will show us that we are moving forward, not just in one particular material to trade, but this can lead to other resources being manufactured and exported and imported, not just to Mexico and Belize, but you know, if we can ever fix it and ever try to see how we can salvage certain relationships, it could go all the way to North America, Central and South America. Paul, this is no small initiative. This is literally and figuratively connecting countries and bodies together in trade and foreign investment.
Yeah, and that's how we continue to build ties. You know, it's not only about saying, oh, we support Cuba, that the government supports Cuba, or lift the U.S. sanctions, but there are clear signs of mutually beneficial relationship. And that's important to stress, April, that there are clear signs of it, and we keep repeating it, but when we talk about our brothers and sisters here in Belize that have been educated and are in health, been educated in engineering, been educated in the economic sector, and they've come back to Belize, and they're some of the strongest contributors to these various sectors. And so it's about that mutually beneficial agreement, and it's about understanding that Cuba has a lot to offer.
Yeah, but also we have to stress, Paul, that Belize also has a lot to offer Cuba, because whenever we have their students that come here, they get to experience new cultures, and it's not just Belizean cultures that they experience. Belize is a multicultural, international ground, and they not get to just interact with Belizeans, but they get to interact with Taiwanese cultures, they get to interact with other Latin American cultures, other Caribbean and North and South American countries. And so it's not just Belize that they get to experience an international stage when they come here, and that is what we have to offer them. We get to give them an open experience.
So what we're going to do now, we're going to invite on set the Minister of Agriculture, Minister Mai. Good morning, Minister.
Good morning, good morning.
You look dashing this morning, sir.
Thank you.
So let's talk a bit event, the significance of this event to Belize's and Cuba's relationship.
Well, it's an honor for us as Belizeans, as leaders of the country, as parliamentarians, to receive the president of Cuba. Cuba has been a long-standing friend of Belize in good times and in bad times. I can speak from an agriculture perspective that Cuba has supported Belize tremendously in the agriproductive sector. Research in sugarcane, I can speak for sugarcane in the north. They did soil analysis, they did soil characterization and profiling in the north. And we have had so many young Belizeans who are graduates from outstanding universities in agriculture in Cuba. So we are grateful from an agricultural perspective. We are grateful to have this honorable gentleman with us today.
What do you make of the setting out here and how the proceedings have been going up to this point? We have the live music. I think we're expecting speeches from a number of persons.
The president deserves only the best welcome from Belizeans. And so what I see over here is very impressive. I'm sure that he will love being in Belize.
Minister, you have any questions?
No, I mean, now that we're hoping to have a physical way of transporting goods and services from Mexico into different parts of Central America and Latin America, if this transition of this train were to happen, what would you like to see in Belize?
I would like to see trade grows in the agriproductive sector. And this is reciprocal trade. At this moment, we import much more from Mexico than we do export to them. I want to see that grow. I think that the best that both neighbors can have is that the economies grow, and that is a wonderful thing.
What fruit and or vegetable do you think that the Cuban president should try from Belize first?
I think our traditional rice and beans is the best,
Yeah.
with coconut oil, of course.
Minister, thank you so much, right? And enjoy the rest of the event. Take care.
Yes, yes.
So now we have the Minister of Public Service, and this is none other than Henry Charles. Good morning. So this is the camera, sir. Just want you to face that way. Yeah. No, it is all a part of live production, right? You figure it out. But Minister, let's talk about today's event, the significance of today's event.
No, it is a historic visit by the Cuban president, and certainly all Belizeans are rightfully excited by it. I believe it's something that will deepen the bonds of friendship, the solidarity between our two countries, and certainly something we look forward to. I just got back from Cuba. Yes, I was there visiting with their parliament and their constitutional reform commission. As you know, we're going through the exact same process right now here in Belize. So we were there to learn how they consulted, what type of consultations, and the process that they use. So certainly this visit comes at a welcome time.
You know, one of the things I'm learning through these discussions that our mutually beneficial relationship is more than just education sector and engineering sector, but there's a lot more. And here you're bringing up your meetings with their parliament.
No, the formal relations between our countries started in 1995, but the actual ties were much longer before. No, we had students going to Mexico from the late 70s and to Cuba in the late 70s, early 80s. Certainly, we have been friends for a long time. Cuba stood up for Belize during the independence movement. The first two Latin American countries were Cuba and Panama. We cannot forget that they were the ones who actually rallied behind us for independence. So all of the naysayers, perhaps they don't know history, perhaps they don't understand what it means to be good friends, neighbors, brothers in this region.
What do you think George Price would say right now if you were here?
He would say, "Welcome, Mr. President." Belizean people are a peaceful, loving people, and we certainly welcome the president to our shores.
Minister, thank you so much and enjoy the rest of the event, okay?
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
All right.
All right.
We have now joining us Minister Oscar Riquena, who has only a moment ago arrived. Good morning.
Good morning, Minister. How are you?
I'm fine, thank God.
All right.
So let's talk about it fit to be here, not only as a government official, but for you as a Belizean.
Well, first and foremost, I want to say that today is a very historic day for Belize, for the government and people of Belize, and certainly for the people in which we see the strengthening of relations that has been for many years, over 27 years. And I want to say that as a Belizean, I feel very proud, very strong of that support, that bilateral relationship that we have had with Cuba. Historically, as many have pointed out, Cuba was one of the first countries that actually supported our bid for independence, and that is significant. When everybody else, was, making up their minds, Cuba was there with us in solidarity, and we have seen how that bilateral relationship has strengthened and grown over the years, where we have seen, medical experts, coming to Belize, to give of their service to the Belizean people and to our country, where we have seen so many, professionals in other areas such as engineers, and other areas coming also, but also equally so, where you have Belizeans who have gone out to study, in the medical field, in the sporting field, and so many other professional and technical areas. So we have to be very grateful and thankful. And I believe that one way in which we can show our gratitude for that strong bond of friendship is really to come today and stand in solidarity with the government and people of Cuba on this historic visit of the Cuban president.
Wonderful. Minister, talk to us about what you think it would mean for Cuba to have all these sanctions removed, for us to finally unblock Cuba, how do you think that that would affect the way the country and the region operates from this way forward?
Well, I will tell you, our position as a country has always been very firm that we believe that, you know, the blockade on the government and people of Cuba is so unfair. You know, today it is important that, you know, the Cuban people, you know, have a right, you know, to their self-determination, and that they be given an equal opportunity, you know, in the greater scheme of things.
Minister, thank you so much and enjoy the rest of the event, okay? All right, and so there we heard from several ministers here at this event that they're telling us about the significance of today's visit and what this means, the importance of this to Belize's bilateral relationship with Cuba.
I think, Paul, that one of our greater achievements in this particular ceremony is that we have shown not just Belize but the world that this event is possible, this peaceful event is possible. And hopefully it will encourage other nations along with Mexico to do the same. What are we expecting today?
Yeah, so that's April. So yeah, exactly what's going to take place here today. I believe that a number of agreements are still being signed.
Right, absolutely.
Signed, and so that's exactly what is happening right now. And I believe that momentarily they will move over.
Wonderful, Paul. As we continue to see other ministers and leaders of the opposition come in, we are hoping to hear the wonderful ceremonies that are to take place today. All of these speeches, all these presentations, I can just imagine the feel and the anticipation as we wait for the policies to be signed and for the president to come out and give his speech and his remarks to the wider Belizean population.
Yeah, indeed, and then for the luncheon, which of course we Belizeans, we love our belly, and that's going to be an important moment for everybody to dine and commune over some good food. And so that's what's happening right now, and we're going to be joined for another interview. This time we're going to have a discussion about the importance and significance of this event. You could come on right here and join. Good morning.
Good morning, how are you?
I'm doing fine, and yourself?
Great.
All right, so for the people, our viewers that are not familiar with you and who you are, let's just tell them a bit about you and what you're doing here.
My name is Said Badiguera, former ambassador of Belize in Cuba.
Right, so...
and also a member of the Solidarity Belize-Cuba association that we have in Belize.
Perfect. So let's talk a bit about your time in Cuba. Your time and what it is that, well, first of all, let's get to today's event and the significance of today's event, the visit of the president.
I am extremely delighted to be part of this historic moment. I think that although many people would want to shake hands with the president, that might not be possible. But the fact that you're here today means a lot. I can only say thank you, Cuba, for everything that you do for Belize. Thank you, Cuba, for educating and forming our professionals. We have hundreds of professionals walking the streets now here that graduated from Cuba, and so we must be thankful for that. We have doctors, Cuban doctors in Belize, and we must be thankful for that. Plus, during the pandemic, it was Cuba that sent a special brigade, to assist Belize. So we have had ties since way back in 1995 when we first established diplomatic relations with Cuba. And I'm grateful that Cuba and Belize have maintained their ties and strengthened their ties over the years, regardless of which party is in power, because both PUPs and UDPs, we've had very strong working relations with the country.
We have spoken about what this event means to Belize government, Cuban government, Belizeans, but what do you think this event means for Cubans right now as we speak?
For Cuba, I believe that since Fidel Castro's, we've had the first president to visit Belize. For Cuba, it means a lot because it means that we Belizeans want to, government of Belize, want to keep on those ties, want to strengthen the relations. They're already strong, but we're going to strengthen them now. And so for Cuba, I believe it's a very historic moment as well. Belize has always supported Cuba in many ways, you know, when voting comes, United Nations, whatever. Yes. And Cuba has done the same for us. Cuba was one of the countries, one of the first countries that also stood up for Belize back when independence days, you know.
As unique a country as Cuba is, help us to paint a picture of some of the similarities between both countries, whether it's cultural, whether it's cuisine. I know it's an island nation and there's climate change issues, but you being there on the ground, help us to paint a picture of that.
One of the first things that called my attention when I first landed in Cuba, I felt like I was in Belize.
Wow.
And the welcoming and the warmth of the people, man, it's so similar to us. The food is different because they don't eat pepper. We like pepper.
Oh, really?
They don't? No. Wow, I'm
no,
surprised.
don't. And the name is Havana, no? Habanero.
Yes.
But the people are so welcoming. They're so warm. So it made me feel at home. Plus, Cuba is a beautiful country, I must say. I would like to say we cannot believe everything that is said about Cuba because that is not true. Living there for the amount of years that I was there, you cannot. It taught me.
Yeah.
How long were you there?
I was there almost 4 years.
Okay.
Can you divulge some myths and some misconceptions that the world probably has of Cuba that you have for yourself seen that is not true?
They've painted Cuba as being an insecure place, that people don't eat, that people don't study, and it's completely out of order, completely wrong, because one thing that I admire and I believe that all countries should have is education, health, and security, and Cuba has the three.
Yeah.
Cuba has the three. So regardless of the system, you know, I won't get into that, and I believe that everyone needs to respect each country's way of governing or system, you know. I wouldn't want anyone to be coming and telling me, oh, your government in Belize or your whatever. So I think that regardless, and there is a reason as to why things are the way they stand in Cuba, but security, health, and education, you can study in Cuba till you're almost about to die.
Wow.
Yeah.
And free.
I think that Belize and Cuba, Mexico and Cuba has proven to the world that you can have different ways of governing and still be friends in the political arena.
And Cuba is the right example that proves that.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Anything you're looking forward to in particular for today's event?
Well, not really. I would have wanted to shake his hand, but I probably won't be able to.
You're one of those persons that you were talking about earlier.
Yes.
We can't shake your hand either, Paul.
So, but the fact that I'm here means a lot to me, you know, and to the Belizean people. And I would say Belize has so much to be grateful for Cuba.
Thank you, Ambassador. Have a great day.
Thank you. All right, and so there, April, was a very important and insightful conversation there with a former ambassador.
Someone who has lived in this space, has immersed themselves in that culture, has lived among the people, and can tell us from the personal point of view the wonderful relation that Belize has with Cuba.
Indeed, and not only that, but to basically demystify for many of us what Cuba really is, you know, all the myths, all the rumors, all that we've heard and learned about Cuba.
Right.
Well,
we're hoping that we can continue to hear those demystifications from the president himself.
yes.
And of course, we are hoping that we can hear the wonderful and continuing relationships that we will have from our own Prime Minister, John Briceño.
what we saw just now, we saw Hugo Pat, another member of the opposition. He just arrived moments ago, and we'll try to see if perhaps we could get a brief comment from an opposition member, because all day we've been talking about support from both sides of the aisle, but right now it's happening is the delegation, which people of the delegation, which includes but is not limited to a number of persons, and we want to start, of course, with none other than His Excellency. Just give us 1 second.
His Excellency Dr. Miguel Diaz-Canel Bermudez, who is again the first secretary of the CCPCC and the president of the Republic of Cuba, along with his lovely wife, Her Excellency Doctora Luis Cuesta Peraza.
Yeah, and then as well we have His Excellency Bruno Rodriguez Paria, and he's a member of the Political Bureau and the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
And His Excellency Rodrigo Manmierca Diaz, who is the Minister of Foreign Trade and Foreign Investment.
His Excellency Jose Angel Portal Miranda, a big ministry here, the Ministry of Minister of Public Health, as well as Her Excellency Josefina Vidal Ferriero. She is the Vice Minister of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Also followed by the General Director of Latin America and the Caribbean Division at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, His Excellency Eugenio Martinez Enrique, as well as Her Excellency Maria Caridad Balguer Labrada, who is the Cuban ambassador to Belize.
And they also have an accompanying delegation, April, and that's the personal assistant to the president. And he is Manuel Anido Cuesta,
as well as the General Director of Protocol at MINREX, who is the Mr. Miguel Lamares Puello, and the Head of Secretary at the Ministry of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Noel Quesada Gonzalez.
And then we have the Director of Central America, Mexico, and the Caribbean Division of their Ministry of Foreign Affairs is Gustavo Feliz Olivares. Yeah, and so April, they are they're signing this morning. They're on the first floor signing, and we've seen some of the delegation exit the building, and there'll be a number of them that will continue to exit as we are on the way to officially begin the ceremonies this morning.
Of course, Paul, we also have to mention that this is a historic event, as well as we saw the Governor General Froilat Salam within that delegation, as well as the Prime Minister of Belize, John Briceño.
Yeah, and so we're expecting speeches from a number of these individuals this morning. And as I mentioned earlier, April, important fact is that we have a host of members from the opposition here, which the former ambassador rightly stated that throughout the years we've had both governments support the Republic of Cuba, showing support for that bilateral relationship with Belize.
It also a good reminder to our viewers, Paul, that we also have our other international diplomatic friends with us here at the ceremony, along with the British High Commissioner and the Ambassador of Taiwan.
Yeah. And so what we're doing now is basically waiting, April.
Yeah.
We're basically waiting
for them to finish signing, opening those doors, and coming down to greet the rest of the public members at the ceremony. And as we do that, Paul, we are being, serenaded by the steel pan. We are being serenaded by the marimba, and we're just hoping that the president is going to enjoy this wonderful cultural experience that
And
he's
I
got.
wish people could get a glimpse of this beautiful view that we have here, this beautiful view of the Caribbean Sea. As the camera looks to us, what we're looking at right now is
Gorgeous view.
still ocean, very calm right now. The sun is shining beautifully.
Yes.
And what better place to be than at the House of Culture, at the Government House, where this beautiful scenery is, and what better place to host the president, the Cuban president, than right here in front of this lovely Belizean and Cuban audience and dignitaries from across the region.
I know we are waiting for the delegates to come, the delegation to come out, but Paul, as we are seeing, folks are still filling up the seats because we are still waiting for other official invited guests to come in to share in this commemorated event.
And you know, I note that there's a seating arrangement in place where you have members of parliament being seated in a certain position, facing directly towards the table that is in the middle. And I would imagine that's where we will have the Cuban president, Her Excellency Froela Salam, the Prime Minister be seated as well. And so on one end we see a bunch of parliamentary, a host of parliamentary members, and then the seating arrangement for the
audience.
other side is faced in a way that they are faced directly towards the stage.
I would imagine that it is so that everyone can witness the signing of these policies being taken place and the agreements that are officially being handled behind closed doors. And so we'll get to witness this historic event. I know we keep saying historic, and I know it sounds very repetitive, but Paul, I can't stress enough how important today is, and the Belizean public needs to be aware of how historic this event
keep in
is.
mind, April 2, that this is a special sitting.
Yes.
Right? This is a special sitting of the House of Representatives, and it's not taking place in the usual
Assembly building,
which is the National Assembly building. That would be the usual venue for sittings and for these types of events. I know that when we have royals visit or different dignitaries, that we have that official
signing,
sitting and signing there at the National Assembly building. But for today, that's not happening.
We are shaking things up today.
And I think part of it has to do with the fact that the president won't be in for long. I believe that he's just here for the day, and that he'll fly out to continue his schedule and what else he has to do.
He is visiting countries that have great standing relationships with Cuba. As we had mentioned earlier, he had just come.
He just arrived from Mexico. Right, and so we're basically just waiting for them to exit and for this official ceremony to begin.
And there is this importance, there's a hush in the room, there is a lull for a bit, because I think it intensifies the importance of this monumentous part of today's festivities.
And earlier we were there at the Philip Wilson International Airport to capture their arrival, which was a bit delayed, but they arrived.
As always, every flight is delayed,
they arrived nonetheless, and that's the important thing, that they're here. So Dwayne and Sabrina, they did an excellent job out there at the Philip Wilson International Airport, where the delegation led by the president and his wife, they were greeted by Her Excellency Froela Salam, and then they made their way over here, escorted over here on a heavy police guard, might I add, because if right now across the city, we drove over here, and across the city there's heavy police presence, and that's one of the things that we note with these types of visits. One of the things we note with these types of events, that security goes from here
it intensifies. It gets intense,
so
because it proves the importance of these persons coming into country.
Right, and so heavy security across across Belize City right now. They were escorted here, and this is where Prime Minister John
John Briceño.
Briceño awaited them, and he greeted them. He welcomed them to the government house, and from there they were all taken up to the second floor
Yes.
for a brief discussion,
Welcome, yes.
welcome discussion. Hey, welcome to Belize. We're glad you're here. I would imagine, because we saw some pleasantries being exchanged. In that it seemed to have been a light mood in the room where Her Excellency Fred Salam was smiling.
Do you know
and
what that
laughing.
event reminded me of? That
me.
moment reminded
Tell
me of.
me.
You know that friend that you haven't seen in many, many
Right.
years, and you finally get to see
Yeah.
them, and of course, shake hands with them for the very first time in a long time, and it's like nothing, no kind of moment or time has passed. You know, that is what that event reminded me of.
Right. Definitely. And so we even saw we saw where the president was smiling
Yes,
as well.
of course.
And he was laughing, and there was that in the room. And so they arrived they arrived at the PGIA. That was a beautiful event. They were escorted over here. That was amazing to see as well. And here, that was quite the spectacle. They got here, they were greeted, they were taken upstairs for that discussion, and from there they were escorted down to the first floor. And that's really what has been taking so long.
What are you looking forward to hearing at this ceremony today?
You know, I honestly, I'm looking forward to hearing the Cuban president's speech. I'm looking forward to hearing what he says about Belize's relationship with Cuba. But more importantly, I'm looking forward to see what exactly comes out of this visit in terms of the agreements that are going to be signed, in
This
terms
sitting-
of these mutually beneficial plans and visions between both countries. Because when you have a visit like this, big things come out of it, and that's what I'm looking forward to.
I wonder, I believe that we had asked the former ambassador what he thought that the Cubans at home right now would be feeling and thinking of as there is this, sitting of the House of Representatives and the signing of these bilateral agreements. And I often wonder if they think about Belizeans the way we think about Cubans, and how similar we share certain cultural ties.
You know, we didn't mention it earlier, but I believe maybe we did. The fact that Belize and Cuba officially will celebrate 28 years in July of this year. So a young budding relationship officially, but as the Minister Henry Charles Usher mentioned, these ties dates back way back into the 50s. And so that's important to note. And while this is the president's first visit to Belize, Prime Minister John Briceño was in Cuba last year to celebrate Belize's 27th anniversary in terms of official bilateral relationship and ties with Cuba. And so that was an exciting trip and an exciting visit for him. We saw where he met a world famous painter over there in Cuba. We saw where he was able to meet some of the students studying there. And so again, it goes to show that while we have this visit taking place, that our Prime Minister has gone ahead in terms of already visiting Cuba and having those conversations and meeting the president over there in Cuba. So it's like old friends. It's like old friends reuniting since last year. It's like, all right, maybe this is something that will take place every year after this, where you have these types of meetups and hey, we're now at 29 years, we're now at 30 years. And then we also know that here in Belize, that to this year, early this year, I believe it's last year, where Cuba celebrates National Flag Day. So this is the day when they first hoisted the flag, their official flag. So for this year, we had an official ceremony here at the very same House of Culture. There was an official ceremony for that, and an entire exhibit, which was curated, by none other than Miss Ileana Smiling. And so we did an entire story on that, where we got the taste of food and everything. But what we're going to do right
Paul,
now,
we
April,
do have to take a short break. We will be right back with this special sitting of the House of Representatives from the Cuban president and the Honorable John Briceño, Prime Minister of Belize, signing bilateral agreements.
And when we come back, we'll take you directly into the official special sitting of the House of Representatives of the National Assembly under the 10th. And so that's what we'll do. We want to thank you so much for being a part of our live broadcast, for staying tuned with us. Sí,
y gracias a todos por visitando con nosotros, para nuestros cubanos. Yo sé que nuestros beliceños están tan orgullosos para tener el presidente de Cuba aquí. Estamos aquí con ustedes, estamos aquí con Cuba. Gracias por venir, gracias por viendo, y nos vemos mucho.
Muy bien.
Muy bien, is that it? Is that it? Nos vemos luego. Ahí, un break.
Thank you for those who are only now joining us. We are broadcasting live from the government house, the House of Culture. You are tuned in live, where first we saw the arrival of
Invited guests for the sitting, for the special sitting of the House of Representatives.
and so right now what's taking place is that we are about to begin the special sitting of the House of Representatives, and at this moment there's a ceremony.
Yes,
They're praying.
opening with the
They're
prayer.
opening with the prayer. Sorry about that. So that's what's taking place right now.
And normally in these kinds of events, Paul, after the prayer normally precedes anthems and so forth. And now we are coming to you
Good
from
afternoon.
the entrance of the government house.
Again, this is the live broadcast for the official visit to Belize of His Excellency Miguel Diaz-Canel Bermudez, who's the first secretary of the Cuban Communist Party and the president of the Republic of Cuba. And you can look at the seating, the way.
So now we are seeing...
Good afternoon. Honorable members, the Honorable President and members of the Senate have been invited to attend the special sitting of the House of Representatives on the occasion of the visit by His Excellency Miguel Diaz-Canel Bermudez. If this is in accordance with your will, the Clerk of the House will be directed to convey to the Honorable President of the Senate and the Honorable Senators a cordial invitation in your name that they should join the meeting. Is this your will, honorable members? Please say aye.
So there we see now first we saw the president of the Senate making her way over along
with the other delegation coming out.
These are
from
the Senate
this is
senators.
Apologies, yes.
Yeah, so these are members of the
Senate
as well, making their way in. So we see Senator for the NTUCB. We see Senator there for the business community. We see senators for the government. We see government senators. We see opposition senators, and their seating arrangement is basically near where the opposition seating arrangement is
Honorable
located.
members, the House will now suspend while we await the arrival of the President, His Excellency Miguel Diaz-Canel Bermudez.
And so now they suspend the House, the sitting of the House of special sitting of the House of Representatives, while they await the arrival of the President. And there, believe he will emerge from the government house shortly. A bit more about the seating arrangement, April. We see where on one end we have members for the House of Representatives on the government side seated on one end, dressed, all beautifully dressed and looking dashing as they are. And then on the other end, we see where the opposition is seated. And right next to them, we see members of the Senate. What I imagine will take place, now that we've gotten a better view of the seating arrangement in terms of the front, we'll have a space for the President of the Senate, as well as for the Speaker of the House will be sitting in front. And I believe we saw where the Clerk of the National Assembly is seated along with his staff. So it's a similar setting to the National Assembly building, for those who are familiar with that. And I would imagine that there is a seat there as well for the President, His Excellency Miguel Diaz-Canel Bermudez. And so this is something we're used to. We also see a podium to the side, right where the flag is, the Belize flag is, and I would imagine also that that is from where the speeches
Will be coming
will
from, yes.
be given, and where this special sitting will be addressed. I saw there moments ago that Mr. Lial, that he had on these headphones, and
Headset,
that,
yes.
you know what that is for? That is for translation.
Ah,
So him being the deputy president of the Senate, Speaker of the House, that he plays a huge role in these official events, and as a result, he will definitely need to be able to get a clear understanding of what the president is saying whenever the president speaks. And so perhaps that gives us an indication that maybe the president will be giving an address in Spanish.
which is important to note as well, Paul, that yes, as much as our Belizean community is watching this historic event taking place, we have to also give the kudos that our Cuban community is also watching diligently as well. And so it is only fair that the Cuban president gives his speeches and his
Indeed.
yeah, he gives his speeches in his mother tongue.
One thing this coverage April has done for me is has shown me that I need to brush up
on
on
your
my
Spanish?
Spanish. And so there we have
All
Prime Minister
right.
John Briceño, as well as the Cuban President, His Excellency Miguel Diaz-Canel Bermudez, alongside Minister of Foreign Affairs Eamon Courtney. We see his CEO,
Yes.
Amalia Maya, as well, and they're making their way down the steps of the government house. You see that famous
Yes, of course,
direction.
showing their way into the special seating and greeting the
We
other
see,
members of the audience as they go along. You have
importantly, Minister Francis
Francis
Fonseca, the
Fonseca,
Minister of
Minister of
Education. So we've
Yes.
been talking about education
as
all
well
morning.
as Minister Kevin
Bernard,
Bernard, Minister
Health.
of Health.
So education, health, foreign affairs,
Of course.
some big topics, and I would imagine surrounds the agreements that have been signed. They're making their way under the tent now, where they will be
Officially seated.
taking their
Yes.
seatings officially, and so that's what's happening at this moment. You know, there'll be a lot of stops towards that for greetings and
As the ambassador, as the former ambassador to Cuba had said,
hopefully he gets
everybody
his
wants
handshake, you know.
to be greeted
And so
by
there's
the
that
president.
shot
Everybody
of
wants
the
to
president.
shake his hand.
So there's that
Yes.
shot, April, of the Cuban president, His Excellency Dr. Miguel Diaz-Canel Bermudez, as he makes his way alongside the president of the Senate. And I would now I take note that that the deputy speaker of the house is actually taking the reign on this event, and so
Yes.
that's why he was up there, and that's why he has on
The headset.
for
Yes.
translation purposes. And
This historic event, Paul.
so we see where the president is taking his seat, and he's basically at the center. He has now been seated. All members of the National Assembly are now seated as well. They are preparing the podium
as we
from where he will speak.
Yes, and of course, now that this is getting ready, Paul, the anticipated moment has arrived.
The most exciting time, April, and that's the
He
address.
is about to greet our
Okay, there he is. A headset is being given to him. And I would imagine as well that's for translation
Yes.
purposes. You know, we find ways to work around these things with technology. The Prime Minister John Briceño has taken his seat as it would modeling the National Assembly, the House of Representatives seating. He's directly on the first seat, and he's flanked by his deputy Prime Minister Curdell hide again, as the seating arrangements would be inside the National Assembly. So that's it.
You know, Paul, I know you're
Distinguished guests, I present to you His Excellency Miguel Diaz-Canel Bermudez, President of the Republic of Cuba. I recognize the Honorable Prime Minister. I recognize the Honorable Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Finance and Economic Development and Investment. Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Madam President of the Senate. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Madam President of the Senate, honorable members of the House of Representatives, honorable members of the Senate, ambassadors, distinguished guests, members of the media, other invited guests, Mr. President, Your Excellency Miguel Diaz-Canel Bermudez, on behalf of the members of the National Assembly, and indeed on behalf of the nation of Belize, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you once again to our beloved jewel, Belize. Señor Presidente, our entire nation is honored to have you here with us in Belize. Your visit is yet another symbol of the deep bonds of friendship that exist between our two nations and people. A friendship that is based on mutual respect, the principles of international law, and those other noble principles enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations, such as the right to self-determination and territorial integrity, non-intervention of the internal affairs of other states, and the peaceful settlement of disputes. Cuba's consistent and principled support of Belize's right to self-determination and territorial integrity, a support which we enjoyed before independence and continue to enjoy even today, is recognized and appreciated by all freedom-loving Belizeans. Your visit, the first state visit by a Cuban president, is yet another expression of this abiding friendship and is most welcome by my government and the Belizean people. 5 months from now, Belize and Cuba will celebrate 28 years of diplomatic relations. These 28 years marked by a robust commitment to constructive and meaningful collaboration. This morning, our collaboration was further enhanced by the signing of 2 more agreements, an agreement on culture and a memorandum of understanding on immigration. Señor Presidente, the Cuban people hold a special place in the hearts and minds of Belizeans and of people all over the world because of their unparalleled generosity of spirit. Cuba's action across the world exemplifies the meaning of solidarity. Thousands of medical professionals from Cuba have gone to assist 169 countries, including every CARICOM country. Belize wholeheartedly recognizes the exceptional efforts of Cuba over the last 60 years in consistently providing medical and technical assistance in times of public health emergencies, such as in 2014, as it prepared the Caribbean region in the event of an outbreak of the Ebola virus. Here in Belize, the critical support of the Henry Reeve Brigade, deployed with immediacy to Belize in the early days of the pandemic, worked shoulder to shoulder alongside our brave frontline workers. Together, Belizeans and Cuban medical practitioners left their homes and families and bravely took on the dangerous fight to combat COVID-19, to combat the COVID-19 virus here in Belize. We honor them, and today, Mr. President, I say on behalf of our grateful nation, thank you. Muchas gracias. Indeed, Cuba's generosity is by no means limited to the medical brigades. Today, hundreds of Belizean students have benefited from a cross-cultural and educational experience studying in Cuban universities. They return to contribute to the development of Belize, imbued with some of that spirit of advocacy and solidarity, having learned that, in the words of Cuba's national hero, José Martí, patria es humanidad. There are many Belizeans who are watching this assembly today who can literally say that they are able to see these proceedings because of Cuba's outreach in Operación Milagro, under which so many Belizeans have undergone treatment to prevent blindness. There are Belizeans who had little chance of survival, but who are now home, productive and well, because of Cuba's critical care program. There are beautiful cases of children now walking and talking and looking to their own futures because of the helping hand extended by your country, free of charge. Nosotros en Belice, y en verdad todos los países que se benefician de la solidaridad cubana, deben de estar conscientes del hecho que Cuba siempre ha extendido su amistad y ayuda cuando ellos mismos se encuentran luchando para sobrevivir bajo las severas sanciones que se les han impuesto. Sabemos que su ayuda no se debe al exceso, sino a la voluntad de dar de lo poco que tienen. Esto es el reflejo del gran espíritu de su país y su gente. We in Belize, and in fact all other countries benefiting from Cuba's solidarity, should be aware of the fact that Cuba has consistently extended a helping hand, even as they themselves fighting for survival under the savage sanctions imposed on them. Este tipo de situaciones no se da al azar, sino depende de un sistema socioeconómico que prioriza el acceso a la salud básica, a la educación universal y pone énfasis en el desarrollo científico desde hace muchas décadas. Es el resultado de una revolución del pueblo cubano y de su líder histórico, Fidel Castro. That sort of thing cannot just happen. It must depend on a social and economic system that prioritizes primary health care, universal education, emphasis on scientific development over the decades. It is a result of a revolution made by the people of Cuba and its historic leader, Fidel Castro. One of the most uplifting and joyful moments in our nation's history was the day when Fidel placed the Jose Marti Medal on the late Right Honorable George Price, one national hero to another. Nicolas Guillen, Cuba's great national poet, wrote, "Lo que Martí prometió, Fidel lo cumplió." I don't think I need to translate this, right? I think everyone understands. But just in case, what Martí promised, Fidel delivered. Belize commends Cuba's steadfast commitment to provide both immediate relief in times of emergency and longer-term capacity building to developing and developed countries. Belize congratulates Cuba for its advocacy for others in the developing world in its various roles, such as the critical role they will play as chair of the Group of 77 plus China within the United Nations system. Belize notes that these actions take place in the face of an unjust and illegal financial, commercial, and trade embargo imposed by the United States of America. Belize further condemns the unjustified designation of Cuba as a state sponsor of terrorism. We continue to urge the United States government to remove Cuba from the state sponsors of terrorism list, as there is no legal nor moral justification for Cuba to remain. In spite of these challenges, Cuba's support continues to have a transformative impact on growth and development of the struggling developing countries of the world, including Belize, and for this we are grateful. On behalf of the people of Belize, we thank you for your example of resistance, solidarity, and collaboration. It is now, therefore, our distinct privilege and honor, Mr. President, to invite you to address this special joint sitting of the National Assembly.
Honorable John Briceño, Primer Ministro y Ministro de Finanzas, Desarrollo Económico e Inversiones. Honorable Marco Nilial, Presidente de la Cámara de Representantes. Honorables Carol Trench, Señora Presidenta del Senado. Miembros del Parlamento, miembros del Cuerpo Diplomático, distinguidos invitados, hermanas y hermanos beliceños. Me dirijo a ustedes en esta sección especial profundamente conmovido por las muestras de cariño recibidas desde nuestra llegada y el honor que nos hacen al invitarnos a dirigirles la palabra. No es algo que nos sorprenda. El Caribe que nos une también nos singulariza como pueblos, pequeños en territorio y población, pero grandes en el espíritu y generosos en el abrazo. Más de una vez, a lo largo de la historia de nuestras relaciones, hemos tenido pruebas de ese afecto que es mutuo y gratificante. De manera que al dirigirme a ustedes, lo hago agradeciendo y a la vez devolviendo el respeto y aprecio que esta invitación muestra por el pueblo cubano, hermano del beliceño,
Cuban
al que
people, which is a
respetamos
brother of the
y
Belizean people,
apreciamos
which we respect
con
and
igual
appreciate
cariño.
with the same love.
En los sentimientos que nos unen
And the
a
feelings
este
that bring
bello
us
país,
together, that
subyacen
to these
hechos
beautiful
notables.
countries, there are notable
Belice
events.
fue visitado por
Belize
nuestro héroe
was
nacional
visited by
José
our
Martí
national hero Jose
en dos
Marti
etapas diferentes de su vida,
twice in his life,
siendo niño
when he was a
y además
child and
siendo
also
adulto.
when he was an adult.
Cuba ha recibido las
Cuba
ilustres
has
visitas
received the
de los
distinguished
primeros ministros
visits
Musa
by
y
Prime
embargo
Ministers
y John Briceño.
Said Musa,
A
Balco,
los
and
dos
Briceño.
últimos
And the last
tuve el
two,
placer
I
de
had the
recibirlos.
pleasure to receive
Recordamos
them. I
especialmente
especially
la
recall
histórica visita
the
que en el año
historic
2005
visit made
nos hizo
to
George
Cuba
Price,
by George
cuando el
Price in
comandante en jefe Fidel
2005
Castro
when the
le impuso al
Commander-in-Chief
primer
Fidel
ministro la
Castro
orden José Martí.
awarded to
Me
the former
cuentan
Prime Minister, the
que
Jose
cuando se
Marti order,
decidió
was
otorgarle la
advised that
condecoración
when
al
the
padre de la
decision
patria
was
de Belice,
made to
se valoró que debido a su
pin
edad
this award on
avanzada y
him,
estado de
it
salud,
was recommended that
una
given his
delegación
advanced
cubana
age,
viniera.
the delegation should come to Belize.
Al consultarle a George
When
Price,
consulted,
respondió que él
Mr.
iría a
Price
Cuba
said he would come to
bajo
Cuba
cualquier circunstancia
under any
para que
circumstance
Fidel
to
le entregara la
receive
orden.
Fidel in person.
Agrego un dato más.
Here's
del valor de
another
George Price.
story that speaks highly of
Durante los
Jones
trámites de
Price's
su viaje a Cuba,
values.
llenó
In
un
his
formulario
Cuba travel arrangements, he
y en
completed
la
a form,
en la casilla de
and in
categoría
the
de
box
empleo
asking
escribió
for his
trabajador.
occupation, he wrote, worker.
Recordamos
We
y
recall
agradecemos de
with
corazón
wholehearted
el
appreciation
homenaje
the
que en el año
tribute
2018 un parlamento como
paid
este
by this
le rindió al
parliament
líder
to
histórico
the
de la
historic
Revolución
leader of the
Cubana
Cuban Revolution in
en el segundo
2018
aniversario de su
to mark 2
desaparición
years
física.
since his passing.
Por esas y otras muchas
For
razones,
these and other
estoy
many reasons,
especialmente
I'm
honrado
particularly
de
honored
que las circunstancias
that the
históricas
historic
me hayan dado la
circumstances have
oportunidad
given me the
de ser el primer
opportunity to
jefe de
be
Estado de la República de
Cuba's
Cuba
first head
y
of state
realizar una
to
visita
pay
oficial
a state
a Belice.
visit to Belize.
Más de 1,000 cubanos
Over
han prestado
1,000
sus
Cubans
servicios en
have
Belice desde
provided services in
1990,
Belize since
cuando se
1990,
inició la cooperación
when the
médica
Cuban
cubana.
medical cooperation first started here.
Varias áreas han tenido también el
Other
beneficio de nuestras
sectors have also
relaciones,
benefited from our
como la
relations,
formación de recursos
including
humanos, la
education,
construcción,
construction,
el deporte,
sports,
la cultura
and
y
culture.
otras. Hoy 122
Today,
cubanas y cubanos
122
comparten
Cubans
con sus hermanos
share
beliceños
their expertise
conocimientos y labores
with their
en
brothers
la
and
salud
sisters in the
y el
Caribbean
deporte.
in areas such as
Decenas de
sports
jóvenes cubanos
and
se beneficiaron de los programas de
healthcare. Dozens of
perfeccionamiento del
young
idioma
Cubans
inglés
have benefited
que
from the
ofreció
English language
Belice.
training programs offered by Belize.
Este breve recuento
This brief account
confirma que Belice y
confirms
Cuba
that
son
Belize and
naciones que han
Cuba
gozado
have
de
enjoyed
excelentes
excellent
relaciones donde han
relations
primado el respeto
underpinned
y la
by
cooperación
respect
mutua.
and
Esta
cooperation.
visita
This
estimula aún más
visit
nuestro
further
compromiso y
enhances
solidaridad
our commitment
con
to
este pueblo que supo con
solidarity with
inteligencia
these
obtener y
people that
preservar su
obtained
independencia
and has
y
preserved its
hallar un camino
independence
para su desarrollo.
intelligently and has charted
Cuba no dudó
its own
nunca
path through
en dar su apoyo a las
development. Cuba
peticiones de los
never
patriotas
hesitated
beliceños
in
que
her
trabajaron
response to the
afanosamente
request from
por
Belizean
conseguir su
patriots
independencia
who worked so
y
hard
asumió
for
esa
independence,
batalla
and Cuba
como una
embraced
causa propia.
their cause
Estimados
as her own.
beliceños,
Dear
los
Belizeans,
intercambios con el primer
our
ministro y su
discussions
delegación
with the Prime Minister and his
facilitarán la búsqueda
delegation
de
will
nuevas
seek to
oportunidades de
identify
cooperar
new
en
opportunities
proyectos
for
conjuntos para
cooperation
beneficio de
in joint
nuestros pueblos.
projects in the benefit of our
Si algo ha
peoples.
distinguido nuestras relaciones bilaterales
Here is a
es que
distinctive
han
feature.
trascendido las formalidades
Our
diplomáticas
bilateral
para
relations have gone
convertirse en
beyond
vínculos
diplomatic
de
formalities
pueblos
to operate as bonds
verdaderamente hermanos.
between two brotherly
Cuba, que se vio
peoples.
fuertemente impactada
Cuba
por la
was
pandemia,
hit hard by
no
the
solo en la
recent
salud de su
pandemic
población, sino también el desenvolvimiento de la economía.
that affected not only
Conoce
our
cómo
people but
afectó la
also our
COVID-19
economic
a
performance. So we know that Belize was
Nuestras dos
also hit
naciones
harder.
han sufrido
Our
también,
two
y más de una vez,
nations have
el
also
efecto devastador
been stricken
de severos
by
desastres naturales,
devastating
como
natural disasters
con
such
la
as
pérdida de
hurricanes
valiosas vidas
that have
y
caused
altos costos
valuable human
económicos.
losses and significant
En
economic
medio de esas
damages.
circunstancias,
Under these
hallamos la manera de
circumstances,
ayudarnos
we have
mutuamente,
found ways to
conscientes
help
de que
each
aun
other
cuando la ayuda ofrecida
on
no
the
fuera
understanding
suficiente,
that such a help
sería
was
sincera,
not enough, but it was
útil
always
y
sincere
alejada de la
and
temporalidad
useful,
de las
and
ayudas de ocasión.
it was distant
Reconozco
from
y agradezco en
assistance,
nombre del pueblo y
seasonal
gobierno
assistance.
cubano la ayuda
On
desinteresada
behalf
que
of the
recibimos
Cuban
desde
people and government,
Belice,
we recognize
tanto
and
durante
thank
la pandemia de
the
COVID-19
Belizean people
como
for its
ante la
selfless
explosión de la base
assistance
de supertanqueros de
during
Matanzas
the pandemic
y
of COVID-19
posteriormente
and the
tras
explosion
el
at
paso
the
por Cuba
oil
del
terminal in
poderoso
Matanzas and
huracán
in the
Ian.
wake of powerful
Para Cuba,
Hurricane Ian.
la
For
pandemia
Cuba,
estuvo acompañada
the
de
pandemic
recrudecimiento
was
sin precedentes del
compounded
bloqueo
by the
económico,
flare-up of
comercial y
the
financiero que
commercial,
impuso nuestro pueblo,
economic, and financial
una política
blockade
que el gobierno
being
cubano de
imposed
Belice
by the
han
USA
condenado
policy
y
that has
exigido
been
que se levante
condemned
de
by the
manera
people and
sostenida y
government
firme,
of
lo
Belize
cual
in a
agradezco
consistent
en nombre de
fashion,
Cuba.
and I thank you for that on
Ese
behalf of
bloqueo
Cuba.
sigue ahí
This blockade
y
remains in place,
nosotros seguimos
but our
enfrentándolo
people
con la
continues
solidaridad
to
mundial de nuestro
confront
lado,
it with the
pero también
equal
con toda
solidarity
la
on our
capacidad
side,
de
but also
resistir
with our
de que ha dado
capacity
pruebas el digno
to
pueblo
resist
cubano
and
por
create,
más de 100
evidence of
años.
which has been given by the Cuban
También
people for
nos
over
acosan
6 decades.
con una brutal
We are also
campaña
under the
mediática
siege of a brutal media
que pretende
campaign that
dividirnos,
intends to divide us and separate us
singularizarnos en nuestro
and
entorno natural y
single
hacia el resto
single
del mundo.
out in
No
our
quieren otra
natural
Cuba
environment.
resistente y
They don't want
desafiante
to
en las
see
prácticas
any
de
other
sometimiento
resistant
y
Cuba
subordinación que los
against the
poderosos
practices of
siempre han
subordination that the
querido
powerful have
imponer
always
a
wanted
otros
to impose on others.
hermanos beliceños.
Brothers and sisters from
Estamos
Belize, we
seguros
are
de que con esta
certain
visita
that this
se
visit will
consolidarán y
further
fortalecerán
strengthen the
aún más los
bonds
vínculos de
of
amistad
friendship
y
and solidarity
entre nuestras
between
dos
our
naciones.
two nations.
Esta visita
This visit
constituye
is
además
also
un primer
a
paso
first step
para el cumplimiento de los
in
acuerdos
compliance
logrados
with the
por
resolutions
Cuba,
adopted
CARICOM,
at the 8th
Cuba.
Cuba CARICOM Summit meeting.
Confirmo que podrán
Let me
seguir contando
confirm,
con Cuba
rest
ante
assured,
los
you will
inmensos
always be
desafíos
able
que
to
siempre
rely on
tendrán por
Cuba
delante
in the face
los
of the
pequeños
immense
estados de
challenges
espiritualidad
ahead of the
inmensa
small
como los
state
nuestros.
of immense
A su lado,
spirituality
como
such as
siempre,
ours.
nos
On your
tendrán.
side,
Que
we
vivan
will
las
always be
relaciones,
there. Long live,
que vivan las relaciones
long
de
live
hermandad
the
entre Belice
brotherly
y
relations
Cuba.
between Belize and Cuba.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Your Excellency, President Miguel Diaz-Canel Bermudez, on behalf of the Senate of Belize, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to Belize. Bienvenidos a Belize. We're thankful and honored by your presence and privileged to have you address us at the sitting of the National Assembly on such a beautiful and glorious Belizean day. On behalf of the Senate of Belize, I also thank you for 3 decades of friendship and mutual respect, and for the support of Cuba in our nation building, whether it is arts, culture, education, healthcare, or sports, to name a few. I have no doubt you have enjoyed our warm hospitality. Excellency, please accept our highest regards to you and your government and people. Muchas gracias, Excellency.
President Miguel Diaz-Canel Bermudez, it is indeed an honor and a great privilege to have you address the sitting of the National Assembly of Belize. We hope that you and your delegation get to experience the friendly hospitality of our beautiful people during your stay. thank you for visiting Belize. On behalf of the honorable members from the upper and lower houses of Parliament, thank you for honoring us with your presence here today. I would like to say that the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Honorable Valerie Woods, who is out of the country due to family medical reasons, sends her apologies for not being here today to witness this special occasion. She extends her best wishes to Your Excellency on this historic occasion, and appreciation and respect for the long, outstanding relationships between our two countries.
Motion relating to the business or sitting of the House.
I recognize the Honorable Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, Economic Development and Investment.
Mr. Speaker, I move that at this rising today, the House adjourn to a date fixed by the Speaker.
Honorable members, the question is that the House at its rising today adjourn to a date to be fixed by the Speaker. All those in favor, kindly say aye. Aye. Those against, kindly say no. I think the ayes have it. I recognize the Honorable Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, Economic Development and Investment.
Mr. Speaker, before I move the motion for the adjournment, let me associate myself with the remarks made by Madam President of the Senate and by you, Mr. Speaker, for recording our appreciation to the President of the Republic of Cuba. President Miguel Diaz-Canel Bermudez, your visit to Belize certainly signals your appreciation for the cordial and friendly relations that our two countries have maintained over the years. Once again, I thank you, and on behalf of the people of Belize, I now move.
Honorable members, the question is that the House now adjourned. All those in favor, kindly say aye. Aye. Those against, kindly say no. No. I think the ayes have it. The House now stands adjourned.
All right, and so there we had it. That brings us to the end of this special sitting of the House of Representatives. April, we saw a number of speeches. Yes. We saw the Prime Minister, John Briceño, first address the House of Representatives and all invited guests. He made a few remarks pertaining to, well, I'll tell you something, right? So something that he mentioned that really struck a chord with me was the fact that, and I didn't even know, the Right Honorable George Cahill Price was the first Prime Minister of Belize to receive Cuba's highest award by President Fidel Castro in 2015, and that's the Jose Marti Award. So that's
Jose Marti, a long-standing historian and advocate for Cuba, and rightfully so. Both the Honorable John Briceño and the Prime Minister of President of Cuba, Miguel Diaz-Canel Bermudez, both highlighted Fidel's legacy and his promise that Jose Marti created for Cuba. Both speeches commemorated all of those efforts, and now you see each of the members of the Senate and the House greeting His Excellency Miguel Diaz-Canel Bermudez.
This is actually a photo opportunity being taken place right here with the Cuban President Prime Minister John Briceño, Deputy Speaker for the House of Representatives, the President of the Senate, as well as other invited guests. And so they are standing to take a photo together, and
to commemorate
what
this
you
historic moment.
may not be able to see while watching this is the fact that there's a number of cameras. The press corps is huge.
Yes.
And
But
so we have a huge
Paul,
press corps here
again,
taking
historic moment. We hope that this will be one of many followed visits by the Cuban president here in Belize. We only have a short moment of his time today, and after this, of course, we'll be following by a luncheon.
Yeah, so we also heard from Prime Minister John Briceño basically his continued call on America, the United States, to remove Cuba from the list of state sponsors of terrorism. He condemned it as an
Powerful statement,
unjustified designation, and he called for the U.S. to remove Cuba from that list, stating that there is no justification for Cuba to remain on that list. And so those are some of the things coming out of the PM's speech. You know, we did not get to hear a lot about
the policies and the agreements
that were signed
Yes.
this morning. We didn't get a lot to hear about that and what really took place, but we saw the Minister of Education come out of that meeting with Prime Minister and the Cuban President.
Health.
We saw the Minister of Health. We saw the Minister of Foreign Affairs as well. And so one would want to imagine that those are some of the key discussion. What we did hear the Cuban president speak about was the fact that this meeting sets the stage for the identification of new opportunities between both countries. So that's exactly.
And I would imagine so. As we would imagine so, that everybody is trying to buy some of the time from the president. But I would imagine that the Prime Minister would later on come out to discuss some of the policies being spoken about.
Prime Minister John Briceño is addressing the press corps.
Yes. But I also believe, Paul, that we will be hearing later on during the week more information about this, the agreements being signed, and the information will be bestowed to the public. I am sure that we will hear more about Cuba and Belizean relations for the rest of the week that is to come.
So one of the other things that the Cuban president also mentioned was that this set the stage for the Cuba CARICOM agreement that was signed some time back, and I would imagine that one of the agreements within that is for these bilateral relationships between Cuba and CARICOM communities to be strengthened. And so that is why you would imagine that we see these visits taking place at this time. And so right now what we're having is we're having a photo opportunity with the House of Representatives in particular and the Cuban president. These are images, April, that you'll see hanging on walls, historic walls and important walls for a long period of time.
Yes. This is something that I feel I'll be having to give a short presentation to my students. And of course, other invited guests will be speaking about this event for a long time.
Oftentimes in school, we're not taught, or these topics are not discussed, right? So what happened here today and what continues to happen here, it brings the relationship, it brings these events to the forefront of Belizean psyche, to the point where it's not just a relationship that we talk about, that we hear about, but it's now something that has become real to us. We're able to visualize it. We've been able to talk about it. We've been able to hear the speech from the Cuban president right here on our grounds. And so this is in essence, the realization of years and decades of relationship. And so the Cuban president continues to greet invited guests, and I would imagine those are some of his countrymen and countrywomen that are asking to take picture with him, because
Again, this short moment of his time, and
Yeah.
we are all trying to embrace him.
and the thing is, right, April, that we have a population of Cubans living in Belize, and so and they love and they support their president.
Yeah.
And so now we see a lot of them out here today, and so now to have him here in person in Belize, we have to get an appreciation of how significant of a moment this
Yes.
is to them as well, to have the president here in Belize, standing on Belizean soil, and them being able to greet their president. I don't know that it would be the case in Cuba that they would be able to do that, and I only say that because what we have here in Belize is a more free-flowing event, an open event to invited guests. Clearly, there's heavy security here, but everyone here has been invited, and so they're being given the opportunity at this moment to take pictures, to take photos. And you know what is interesting, April? We just saw where the former Cuban ambassador, he actually did get to shake the president's
Yes,
hand.
he did.
And so that's for me, that's a delight. That's a delight in the whole
At least
thing.
he got that opportunity, as well as many other invited guests are sharing in this glorious event.
So that is what we're watching right now, a photo opportunity. We see the Belmopan Mayor also
Yes, she
was
is
able
there.
to get a chance to take a shot with the Cuban president. Mayor Sharon Palacio was there in a photo opportunity as well. Now they're making their way back into the House of Culture. We see Patrick Faber here as well, as opposition member. We see Tracy Panton as well, another opposition member. We see Hugo Pat, another opposition member. And it shows that both on the opposition and the government side, that Belize has had a long-standing
relationship. And that was also highlighted
support.
and stated in the Cuban president's speech, as
There
he
you go.
mentioned that it did not matter which prime minister was in office at the time, that the strong relationships that Belize had with Cuba had maintained and hold. And he lists them right from from Honorable George Price all the way down to now Prime Minister John Briceño.
Yeah, so what I believe we are going to do is we're going to take an opportunity to get in front of the camera, show our faces to you for one last time, and do some wrap-ups. So you do want to stay tuned as...
We are...
Okay, so we're going to do that shortly, but we're lower on the flat, and we're going to just continue observing as the event quickly comes to a close. I believe that what happens next is that the delegation will be taken over to the government, to the House of Culture.
For their luncheon.
And I would imagine that I would love to see what's on the menu.
Yes, I would. But also, Paul, let's just take in the moment here to showcase that we are standing now in front of the government house, as we are seeing so many photo ops and so many members of different, not just areas of government, but different organizations, educational institutions. Everybody has come out to pledge their support in this grand historic moment in relations with Cuba and Belize.
What was a highlight moment for you in April?
I'm a history buff, so I appreciated the facts that the president had made mention about Jose Marti, which is a long-standing member of He's basically a national hero
In Cuba. Okay.
And he made philosophies and mandates that Fidel Castro and the Castro family,
Yeah.
as well as the new president of Cuba, have now tried to bring forth and will continue to share progress in that legacy. And when I talk about legacy, I'm not just talking about education, medicine, engineer, but I'm talking about liberal arts. He was a poet and he was an artist in his own right, Paul. And so they're just sharing with us all of this wonderful, rich history that Cuba has to offer and to continue to educate our Belizean public. And I just needed to make mention of that because we hear so much about Fidel Castro, we hear so much about Che Guevara, but we never hear about Jose Marti. And one of the things that I think is very important for the Belizean public to know is that without Jose Marti, there would not be this Cuba that we know today.
One of the highlights for me, April, is the fact that we're having a sitting of the House on the seaside. You know, I want to recommend to the National Assembly that we relocate to the seaside.
Yes.
I want to recommend to the National Assembly that we relocate to the seaside so that we could continue to have this beautiful scenery in the midst
we should always have
in the midst of
these
all
kinds
the
of
banters inside the National Assembly, inside the House of Representatives, and inside the Senate. That we have these
events.
These types of events here in front of the seaside. But on a serious note, April, it's for me the highlight of today's event is one, just having the privilege and opportunity to be involved in such an important coverage, you know, for us, our team here at News 5, for all the technical persons behind the scenes, the men behind the cameras. That for me is to see the teamwork that it has taken, the teamwork that has been invested to make this event a reality and to bring this broadcast to you, our viewers. That has been the highlight of my day. And then to sit down and hear the speech from the Prime Minister and to hear the speech from the Cuban president, these speeches which highlighted the strength of our bilateral relationship, another highlight there for me.
It also holds testimony, Paul, that it doesn't matter that we come from different backgrounds, different cultures, different languages. We can come together to bring forth agreements and policies that will be in the benefit of both nations.
You know, I'm glimpsing to my right, and I'm seeing, I'm hearing the marimba. I feel like I'm smelling the food as already. Well, listen, one wind blow over here, and I continue smelling that food. I'm leaving. I am leaving.
You're leaving?
The set.
I wonder what Sean Quinlan
I'm going
cooked
to
up.
go and get some food and participate in that because the food smells lovely. the marimba band, they're playing over there. So basically what's happening, we're moving the celebration from this side over to that side. It's the same compound. Understand that the Cuban president will only be here for today.
Yes.
And he and his delegation, that they will fly out today. As I understand, he has other official visits within the region to attend to. And so this is just a part and parcel of a tour that he has ongoing. And but it's lovely. It's lovely that Belizeans was really able to have this experience and experience this with us here.
And you know, that does again show that it's not just Belize that is standing with Cuba, but other members of the Latin American and Caribbean community do stand with Cuba. And as we rightfully mentioned before, strong words from our Prime Minister that remove these sanctions, unblock Cuba, remove Cuba from that terrorist watch list, because at the end of the day, Cuba has been a powerful ally within the Caribbean and Latin American community, and we need to continue to show our appreciation and our strong relationship with them.
Indeed, and so April, this has really been a wonderful time. We're seeing that people continue to make their way from over where under the tent where the special sitting took place, and they're making their way over to the to the
House of Culture.
for this official luncheon that is about to take place.
Yes.
We saw that the Cuban president was escorted inside and that he was followed by members of the House of Representatives as well as members of the opposition, and we now see those members of the opposition making their way out of the government house, and I would imagine they're now making their way over to the
luncheon.
To the luncheon,
Right, so
to the
we just
House
had,
of Culture,
Honorable Patrick
to
Faber
participate
has just passed us,
in
as well as Honorable Tracy.
luncheon. And given all that has happened this week, April,
Yes.
it's significant to see that opposition members are here attending this event and in strong support. I think that I know that out of the 5 members of the House of Representatives, we've seen 3 here.
of them.
So 3, that's a
Yes,
majority. So to say that the majority of the opposition supports this visit is to state indeed a fact.
You know, Paul, again, it just
And
goes
then we
back
see the
full
Cuban
circle.
president.
Right.
So what we'll do now, we'll step aside a little bit, April,
Yeah.
over there, and let's get the shot of the Cuban president.
Wonderful.
So there we have the Cuban
He is
president
with
alongside
Prime Minister John Briceño and his lovely wife.
Right,
Yes.
and it's just a beautiful moment of them walking over to
the
House of
luncheon.
Culture for this amazing luncheon. This amazing lunch prepared, of course, by none other than Chef Sean.
I know he have something wild whipped up, you know. I can just imagine.
I could
Don't
just
smell the
imagine.
food already.
You smell it, right?
Yes.
I tell you, I smell this food for
And it breeze to blow it
early
towards me. It breeze to
April.
blow it towards me.
I
But
told
what a
you
lovely,
that
lovely
I am-
sitting.
Okay. Yeah, it's just a lovely, lovely, lovely smell. Lovely scene here this afternoon, April, as the Cuban president makes his way over to the House of Culture.
Wonderful. I'm just enjoying this music
of
and
course.
taking in the moment.
That's the marimba music.
Yes.
Come now, let's end.
All right. And Paul, we are slowly coming to a close.
We are. It's been an amazing day. It's been an amazing day, April, and we want to thank all of viewers for joining us, for staying tuned with us and staying tuned to this live broadcast. We want to thank all our support teams. We want to thank Dwayne and Sabrina for their coverage over there at the airport, for the technical team over there at the airport, for the cameramen, all this technical support crew. We want to thank our CEO. She's behind the scenes working really hard to ensure that all of this comes together. We want to thank our OIE producer, Vianney, as well, who has been doing an excellent job just directing us and making sure that we get out, say what we need to say, and that things flow smoothly. It takes an entire team, April, to ensure that something like this happens. And of course, we do it all for you, our viewers.
And of course, we want to thank the government's press office as well for giving us the opportunity to host this event alongside them. Paul, I have to also give a wonderful thank you to the entire community that has come out to view this historic event. Estamos muy felices y privilegiados para compartir este evento histórico con ustedes y esperamos que puedan apreciar la importancia de este momento, y a nuestros cubanos estamos ansiosos por ver el crecimiento de nuestras relaciones diplomáticas. Muchas gracias y continuamos a ser amigos en este gran Caribe.
Que viva Cuba! And we of course want to big up Sean Quillen as we head over to the luncheon for the amazing meal that is about to be served to the Cuban delegation. So once again, que viva Cuba! We want to thank you. With that, we're signing out. Have an excellent day. Thank you.
Goodbye, please.